Hello, I'm Pamela Igbo, and you're welcome to Real Talk with Pam, the show where authenticity meets conversation and lived experiences become shared and learning ones. Today's show will focus on dealing with grief as a parent and the challenges and complex emotions that can arise as a result. And joining me to share her incredible story is Ewoma Oloye, a married mom of 2 kids and a co-founder of K2U Puzzles, which helps children build their critical thinking skills. She's also a HR expert with nearly 2 decades of experience in human capacity building. So let's get started. Ewoma, thank you so much for being on Real Talk with Pam. I know that today we're going to be talking about being a parent who is grieving because you lost a child. I can't even imagine myself. I have an 18-year-old and I can't imagine losing my only child. So it must be so difficult. But I really want to say thank you for even, wanting to share your story, because I know that this is going to help so many women out there. So I'd like you to just, as much as you can, take your time. Please share with us the story of you losing your child, because I know you were pregnant and, happy that you were pregnant again. You already have 2 kids, right? And you were, happy that you were going to give birth to another baby. Was it going to be a boy? A girl. So please tell us that story as to how you lost your child at 35 weeks. That's pretty much full term.
Yes.
Yes, so I'll just let you talk.
It was an eventful 35 weeks, I would say. I had, a couple of things during pregnancy, which is not unusual. For me especially, after 2 children, I know that for a fact. In fact, I'll say that this pregnancy, this last one, was probably the easiest one.
Right.
And was an interesting one. I remember when I was just about 14 weeks, I would say, I can't wait to see the face of this child that has done this to me. Because it was, at 14 weeks, I looked like I was probably 38 weeks. It was very, amusing. But unfortunately, at the point of birth, things went, in a direction that was completely unexpected. During the pregnancy, towards the end, I was diagnosed with preeclampsia.
Can you just explain to our viewers what preeclampsia is?
So preeclampsia, in simple terms, is protein in the urine and high blood pressure while pregnant.
Right.
That's the simplest explanation. So I was diagnosed with preeclampsia, and usually when you're diagnosed with preeclampsia, there is a management system put in place for you by your gynae, and then if things are not getting any better, typically, so what I got to know eventually is that the baby needs to be taken out to preserve the life of the mother. This was my first time with preeclampsia. I had never had it with my previous pregnancies. So I was diagnosed with preeclampsia. My blood pressure kept going up and wasn't coming down. Kept going up alarmingly, I would say, because most times I would have blood pressure readings of 180 over 106.
Oh, wow.
185 over 112.
That's pretty high.
Yes.
That's high enough to stroke high.
Yes.
Right.
That's stroke high. But ironically, my doctor would still let me go home. And they kept prescribing a particular medication for me, which I kept, saying, it appears this thing is not working. In fact, it looks like it's working in the reverse, because they give me the medication and then my blood pressure continues to go up. So after about 2 weeks. So, I kept going and coming back to the hospital. And eventually my gynae goes, oh, maybe we should bring out the baby. And I'm looking at her, maybe. But of course, I was actually really tired towards the time. And in that last week, I was consulting with other doctors, thankfully. My brother, who is a medical doctor, was, following up with me regularly. And on Monday, the 27th, I remember it was the 27th because it was Children's Day.
Mm.
And I had gone to the hospital with my other two children so that they could observe the scan of the baby because they were both very excited. They were expecting a new sibling, and I didn't tell them the gender of the baby, so they wanted to know. So we went together, we did a scan, we saw the doctor. My blood pressure was still high. She wanted me to see a physician. For whatever odd reason, the physician refused to see me. And then eventually we went home. But when I got home, my brother rang me and asked me, why was I back home? I said, well, I left the hospital. He said, no, that baby needs to come out. And then I also spoke to a senior friend of mine, a mentor, who is a psychiatrist who had also been following up with me. And that day as well, he rang. He rang me earlier in the day, in the morning, while I was in the hospital. And then I said, I'm in the hospital. He said, okay, I'll check back on you, which he did in the evening. And he said, I need to consult. I need to get, another opinion. Why is your gynae leaving you with the baby in? And he asked me a question. In fact, he had asked me that question the week before. Is it a boy or a girl? I said a girl. It was like, okay, that he's asking because if I was carrying a boy, he could probably understand why my gynae was delaying taking out the baby. Because apparently, I didn't know this before, girls tend to do better than boys if they are out before, full term. Yes. In fact, what he said to me was girls will almost always survive, no matter how early you bring them out, as long as it's within, the period where you can bring out the baby and the baby will survive. The girl will almost always survive. Boys, less likely. So most times they tend to, push. So he kept saying, there's no reason why your doctor is waiting. He said, you know what, I'm going to consult with some other doctors on your behalf. And he did. So he asked me for the medication I was on and my blood pressure reading for that day, which I sent to him. And he consulted with 3 other doctors, wherever, I don't know where they are. And he sent me, so he forwarded it to me via WhatsApp. So I knew it was a message someone sent to him, so it was forwarded. And he forwarded me, so he forwarded the first one, it was like obstetrician 1. Forwarded another one, obstetrician 2, obstetrician 3. And all 3 obstetricians responded to say the dosage I was on, they were too high for the blood pressure reading that I had sent. And if I was already past 34 weeks, the baby should be brought out immediately. So he rang me back and then goes, I need to go back to the hospital. I said, well, it's already late. I'll go first thing tomorrow morning. Same thing with my brother who had called. In fact, my brother scolded me. He was very upset. He said, go back to the hospital, go back. So Tuesday morning, first thing in the morning, 8 a.m., I was in the hospital. And I saw my gynae. And then she was like, oh, how am I? That, okay, I should come back on Thursday.
What?
So I was like, why am I coming back on Thursday? And she goes, oh, come on Wednesday and then we'll take out the baby on Thursday. I said, why can't I be here? I'm here now.
Right.
Why don't you admit me now and take out the baby tomorrow? And she goes, oh, it's a theater day tomorrow. So the theater is full and I will need everybody to, the anesthesiologist to be present. She gave some excuse. And I said, okay, if that's what you say. I mean, she's my doctor. So I got up and was about to leave. So on my way out, I saw another doctor who is not a gynecologist, who is a general surgeon in that hospital. And he's like, okay, you're here, we're keeping you today, right? I was like, I hope so, but my gynae is not sounding like it. He was like, no.
So he understood the urgency,
yes,
right?
He understood the urgency. And he was like, no, you have to stay. But my gynae said I should leave. They were not going to keep me. I mean, if they were not going to admit me, they were not going to admit me. And she told me, oh, if you have any issues, call me. If you have any sudden headaches, call me. I said, okay. So I went home.
Can I ask you, before you continue, Woman, did you, at this point, did you feel any movement of the baby at this point?
Oh, yeah.
The baby was still moving?
Yeah, the baby was still moving.
Right.
The baby was fine. But at about 10, 11 p.m., I started having very terrible headache. Blinding headache, in fact.
Right.
So I told my husband, I was like, I'm having a bad headache. So he said, okay, you know what? Let's call my brother. So he rings my brother. And so the kind of headache where your eyes are closed, you actually cannot open up your eyes. That kind of headache. So I told him, I said, tell him I'm having a headache. He said, speak. So my brother, of course, on the other side of the phone, Elma, are you okay? I was like, yes, I'm having a bad headache. Say, Elma, hang up the phone and call your gynae. If you're having a headache, hang up, because my brother is far away.
Right.
I'm in Lagos, my brother is in Delta State. He said, hang up the phone, call your gynae immediately. I said, okay. So my husband hangs up and rings my gynae. And my gynae goes, do you have paracetamol there? Panadol? I said, yes. So my husband was like, yes, we have Panadol night. She said, any type of Panadol, as long as it's Panadol, just take it. And then let me know how you feel. So I took it and I slept. So early in the morning, I get up. So it's the day she says I should come.
Right.
So I get up, had something little to eat. And then my husband is like, let's go. And I'm like, she said I should come today. The day is plenty. And he was like, no, let's go. So this was at about 11. And I realized that I had not felt my baby move. So even when you're sleeping, I mean, when you're pregnant with, an old fetus of 30-something weeks, even in your subconscious, if your baby is awake, you will know. So you probably will not wake up, but you can, feel
it
the baby
moving,
moving.
yeah.
And I just realized that I had not felt my baby move up until that time. So I was like, my baby has not moved today. So I did some kind of, jig on my body, and I was like, okay, let's go. And we get up and we go to the hospital. So I get there, and then I asked for my gynae. And the person taking my vitals goes, oh, she's going to see the other doctor. There are 2 gynaes in the hospital. And I'm like, no, that's not my gynae. The other person is mine. But anyway, whatever, I was there to be admitted. So another doctor walks in, a younger doctor, the GPs, or I don't know what they are called here. He walks in and he goes, oh, your doctor has told me that you're coming, so I'm the one to attend to you. So come upstairs. So I go upstairs and I'm sitting. So I asked, I'm here to see my doctor, and the person at the desk goes, she doesn't come in on Wednesdays. So I was like, she doesn't come in on Wednesdays. Said no. So I had I'm not sure which of those reactions was that, whether it's a smirk or, and I went back to my husband. I was like, she doesn't come on Wednesdays. That's why she did not admit me yesterday. So she doesn't have to come in today to do the surgery.
Right.
That's what I said. And then we sat, and the whole place was, people were moving. When there is chaos, let me put it that way, all over the place. I was like, I'm not comfortable. Maybe we should just go back home and come another day. And my husband was like, no, sit. So the other doctor, the surgeon, passes by again.
So the one who saw the urgency,
yes,
the surgeon, right?
He passes by again, and then he sees me, and he's like, you didn't stay yesterday. And my doctor asked me to leave. And it appears you people are not even ready to have me today. Maybe I should go back home. And he said, no, you can't go back. You must stay. I'll be back. I think he was having a surgery at that moment. So he said, wait, I'll be back. So I sat. And at that point, I realized this was like maybe an hour after I got to the hospital. And I still had not felt my baby move. So I quickly sent my gynae a message that I'm here and I have not felt my baby move
all morning.
Day.
Right.
So she rings me. And then I told her, my baby has not moved. I have not been admitted into a ward. And when I spoke to my brother, he kept insisting that I should ensure they give me magnesium sulfate, I think.
Right. Right. That reduce your blood pressure?
Yes, because he said that my numbers, if I wasn't given that medication, I could have seizures on the table.
Right.
I should make sure I tell my gynae. So the way he kept saying, make sure you tell your gynae, make sure you, so I was particular, and he made sure he told me I could have seizures. In other words, if you don't take the injection, you can probably die. So that stuck. And I kept telling my gynae. My gynae's response to me was, oh, we'll give you magnesium sulfate to protect the brain of the baby. I said, no. My brother said that is to prevent me from having seizures. And she goes, oh yes, medications probably, usually have more than one use. I said, anyway. He said 24 hours before surgery, magnesium sulfate. So when I was talking to her, I told her, I said, you're saying surgery is tomorrow morning. This is almost 3 o'clock. Nobody has given me any magnesium sulfate. I have not felt my baby move. I have not even been admitted into a ward. And she was like, oh, that I shouldn't worry. I'll be admitted into the ward. And then they will come and start all the medications they're supposed to give me before the day. And I sat there. Maybe after another 1 hour, they eventually admitted me into. I sent her a message again that I had still not felt my baby move.
Right.
And she said, oh, that they were going to bring the machine to do a CTG. So a CTG typically is what they use to check the fetal heart rate. So I said, okay. And I had done that quite a couple of times because I had contractions.
Oh, there you go. That's it. Contractions.
Yeah. So I had several preterm contractions. So usually when you have preterm contractions like that, they do a CTG to check the baby's heartbeat. So so I knew what she was talking about. So I sat in the ward and I was waiting. It was about maybe 5, 6 o'clock. So this is maybe 3, 4 hours since the first time I told her. And still no machine. So I sent her a message again. Nobody has come to do the CTG. Nobody has come to give me magnesium sulfate. This is the time. So she rings me and goes, oh, there was someone in labor, so the machine was being used for the person, and that they were coming to check now, and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'm waiting. But I remember my brother said the time for that medication. And she was like, oh, you can still take it up to 12 hours before. And I sat and waited. And they didn't come to do the CTG until sometime past 7, probably to 8. And they did it and left. So I was just, eyes closed. So after they had connected, immediately they connected it and I heard the heartbeat. My first response was, this heartbeat is low.
Right.
And the nurse and the doctor both go, oh, it's just the volume, because there is somebody else in the ward so that we don't disturb the person. I was like, really, are you sure? They said, oh, yes, yes, yes. I was like, okay, if you say so. So they did it, tore out the report and left. So I became, conscious a couple of minutes later, and I'm like, oh, where is the report for the CTG? And the nurse there was like, he doesn't know, that he will go and ask the doctor. The doctor is supposed to tell me. I also found that strange because, I had done a couple of CTGs. I have 2 children. So normally, CTG is like an ECG.
Right.
So it's reading.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And then I guess I forgot. And sometimes, so they gave me the magnesium sulfate after a lot of drama. That's another story on its own. But they eventually, gave it to me. And I was there. I didn't sleep. Because, of course, I had not been sleeping for a while. With my blood pressure where it was, I was hardly sleeping. And then I was excited. My baby was to come, the next day. So sometime in the night, even the IV in my hand got finished. No nurse to change it or anything. I was like, you know what? Let my baby just come. And then
You were going to obviously have a cesarean section,
yes,
right? An
yes,
elected cesarean.
yes.
Right. Okay.
So in the morning, I got up very early, very excited. Went, had a bath, changed into a fresh
Close.
gown.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, oh, when my baby comes, I need to be smelling nice. So I took extra time. And I sat and was waiting. So my doctor comes in and she goes, how am I? Am I ready? I was like, oh, yes, I am. She said, okay, have I felt my baby move? I said, not really, no, actually. I've not felt her move. She was like, oh, okay. I said, by the way, I was not told the result of the CTG. She said, oh, really? Oh, they should have told me. But they told her it was 125, the FHR, the fetal heart rate. I was like, 125. Doctor, that's a problem. She was like, oh, no, no, I said that's a problem.
What should it be normally?
Because I had done several CTGs, the fetal heart rate of my baby when I'm having contractions were between 138 and 142.
Right.
And she goes, oh, no, it's still within the band, and that there was a spike in the report. So once there's a spike, she said some rubbish. I was like, okay. So she brought the forms, I signed. My mom arrives. Then I'm going to have a cesarean. So, of course, they're going to have to check heartbeat and all of that before I proceed to the theater. So the nurse comes with a small thingy that they use. So the nurse was poking, and I was like, you won't find her. So, check. several times they have to check all the way to my back, to find the heartbeat. So she keeps checking and checking. And she was like, she can't find the heartbeat. I said, well, that's not unusual. So she goes and calls my gynae, and they come up with a portable scan machine. So they try, they can't find it. And like I said, from experience, you can actually look for my baby's heartbeat for about, 20 minutes and not find it. The only machine that will find it is the standard scan machine. Once you see it. So she was like, she can't, that this machine is old, that maybe they needed to move this major one to the ward. I'm like, why do you need to move it? I can walk downstairs. I can walk. They're like, okay, I need to come downstairs. So we go downstairs. And the radiologist, I think that's what they're called. So, of course, he had seen me on Monday. He had seen me on Tuesday. He saw me walk into the hospital. So I had done a scan on Monday. I had done another scan on Tuesday. He had seen me on Wednesday. And here I was on Thursday morning. So we had become chatty. So he chatted with me and I lay down. So he checks and there was no sound. So I was just looking. But I didn't realize. I think what struck me was he became very fidgety. He began to tremble.
Wow.
That was what I noticed. So I did not notice that there was no sound. I noticed that he was trembling. So I look at him and he looks down. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The matron that was there got up and left. And I heard the gynae tell her to call my husband. So I'm looking at all of them, and then, they made this hasty retreat
Right.
from the scan room. And then my husband, races down. So as he walks in, my doctor then begins to tremble. She then goes, oh, she's very sorry, but they lost the heartbeat.
Wow.
And I'm looking at her. At that point, I didn't say anything. So I just stepped down.
You were probably thinking, what is going on, right?
No, I was refusing the report.
Right.
So I refused to accept it. So I'm walking back to the ward and then I'm praying. So I put my arms around my tummy and then I'm praying and then I'm calling out to my daughter and telling her, don't worry, we'll soon bring you out. Whatever it is that's choking you, take it out. I'm like, but don't tell me that you are not beating. So, and then in between, I'm speaking in tongues. And the doctor comes back and goes, or the nurse, whoever, I can't remember, that I should come down to the theater because it had to be a cesarean anyway.
Right.
So I go down and I'm like, okay, it's a cesarean, it's going to be quick. So they're going to bring her out and then, resuscitate. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. So that's what I told myself. So I didn't speak a word. At that point, I didn't say anything to anybody except my husband. He asked me a couple of questions. I answered him. Um, and then we go in for the surgery. So they start. I can't remember if I fell asleep or not. But when they were done, I kept waiting.
So can I just backtrack for a little bit, Oma? So basically, you just found out that there was no heartbeat with your daughter, and obviously, it's astounding to me, this story you've just said about how, for lack of a better word, incompetent and lackadaisical they were at the hospital for whatever reason we don't know. Um, I'll ask you that in a little bit. But so then you had to now go and give birth to your dead baby, basically. And did they put you under so you didn't know what was going on?
They didn't put me under.
You were
I
awake,
was awake.
but they gave you epidural, and then they just took the baby out,
Yeah.
and then they took the baby away.
Well, my husband said they attempted to resuscitate
Okay.
because he was watching. He was there.
Mm-hmm.
He said they attempted to resuscitate, but it was obviously too late. So that was what he said. But by the time they closed me up, I kept hoping that she would cry.
Okay. Some tissue. And when you say you're angry, are you angry at God? Are you angry at them?
I'm not angry at God.
You're not angry at God.
I'm angry at the doctor and the hospital.
Have they ever taken responsibility?
No,
They have not taken responsibility.
no.
So what excuses are they giving?
They've not even given any. I saw a document, a response to a query about it, where the doctor wrote some ridiculous thing about not having bed space on Tuesday.
Not having bed space on Tuesday. But obviously she's not telling the truth, right?
I mean, any other doctor will tell you that if your hospital does not have bed space, you refer.
Mm-hmm.
So that is not even an excuse.
And did you have your other kids at this hospital?
No.
You didn't. So this was your first time experience,
Yes.
and it turned out to be a horrible one.
Yes.
And yet they haven't taken responsibility.
As far as I'm concerned, no.
Wow. And that surgeon that you talked about, have you seen him since then?
Yes, I have. Yes. Funny thing is that he now, you know, attempted to manage me after the surgery. He was the only one, that had to keep checking my blood pressure and then, prescribing medications and all of that. But still, when you have a baby, you have to be managed by a gynae, not a general surgeon.
Of course, yes.
So, but he tried, and I think he also understood the place of how we would feel and the need to distance ourselves from anything that is a reminder of the hospital.
Right. And when did this happen, Awoma? You said it was in May?
Yes.
So it's fairly recent.
Yes.
So how have you coped? What has helped you cope? Particularly as you have two other kids. So how has the grieving process been? You've been, having to still be there for your family. You have two kids.
So I'm thankful for a lot of things in my life. I'm thankful that I am Christian
Right.
because my knowledge and relationship with God was one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was my family. So my family, starting first and foremost from my husband, it was very amusing to watch him pack his grief into a container, seal
Right.
it, hold it close, and make sure I recover.
Right.
So I say amusing because he was dealing with it as well. In fact, worse off than me.
So what was that dynamic like? So when you say he packed his grief, because obviously he didn't want you to you to see him that way,
No,
or
because so a couple of things he did. He didn't let me see her.
wise.
He didn't let me see her. I begged and cried and pleaded, and he told me anytime I wanted to see her, he would describe her to me because he carried her, sang to her, prayed for her, checked her, and he told me, gave me a graphic description of what she looks like.
Do you regret that he didn't let you see her? Do you think that you would have coped better if he saw her? If you saw her?
And he knew. That's why he didn't let me see her.
What was her name?
I
Ayomide. Beautiful. Which means joy has come, right? My joy
joy
has
has
come.
come. And then my wonderful children, they were so mature. My daughter is just going to be 10, and my son just turned 7 just after the incident. And when they were told,
What did you tell them?
I didn't.
Okay.
So my mom
Mm-hmm.
told them.
What did she say?
She wouldn't tell me what she said. But of course, my son refused to accept it. So he rings me up while I was still in the hospital
Oh, really?
to ask me, when is the baby coming home?
Wow.
So my husband had to go back and, have another conversation with them. And he told me, he said they cried, they were sad, they all cried together. And he goes, the next thing my children do is, so we need to get back to the house, because at this time they were with my brother. We need to get back to the house and take out all the baby things before mommy comes home, so that mommy doesn't see them and become. So they did that. And when I came, they wouldn't ask me any questions. They would just come, hug me, ask me how I'm feeling, ask me if the surgery, the incision point was healing. They wanted to see it. And then they will make sure I eat. They will stop by, have a short conversation with me, and then go. They were in my brother's house, so they will come to the house and, talk to me and then be like, oh, mommy, we're going.
That's
So,
pretty amazing. They were like quite mature.
yes, they were. They were. And then my mom, my mom was my mom.
Mm.
And she did everything and more than any regular mom. She tried, not that she tried, she did, nurse me back to health, took care of my children, would come talk to me. She would let me cry and then report me to my siblings that I'm crying. And she was all round solid, as were all my siblings. Those that were close and those that were far were all close. They were checking in, sending food, they were calling, they were sending.
They had a lot of support.
I
Amazing.
had all of that. And then I also had other people that are, I will call them family as well, not my siblings. Well, for example, my mentor that I spoke about as a psychiatrist. Funny thing is that he had also lost a child who was a toddler. So he was my therapist because he took on that role. And then he would also encourage me from the point of someone who had, experienced grief, a parent who had experienced grief, and his wife as well. They would call me. They knew when it would get difficult. They told me certain things that would happen in the course of my grief journey. So when I get to that point, I would recognize it.
So do you mind sharing some? Because I know they say there are 5 stages of grief?
Well, I don't know about those stages.
Right. But what are some of the
For
things?
example, his wife told me that I will get better. And that when I get better, I would feel guilty.
That you were getting better.
And I will make myself sad and unhappy because how dare I
Move on. Because it makes you feel like you're forgetting your child, right?
like it's a betrayal.
Right. Do you still feel that way?
When you are told about something, it better prepares you.
Right.
He also told me, so at times when it looked like I was, recovering, I had done some things, and then I just send a message to ask that, okay, will my tears ever dry? Will I ever stop crying? Would I ever? And he told me, he said, at those times, give thanks. Someone else said to me, and a lot of times when you hear some of these things, they sound like, ugh, you don't even know what you're talking about. But it's true. Said to me, it's the water that poured. It's not the calabash that broke. I think there is some Yoruba adage around that. And she said, you are here. You have 2 children. What if it was you? It would have been a lot worse for your family to deal with. So thank God that you are here. That it was not worse than this. And I would just say, pretty quickly, several people told me that what I described to them, and I mean medical professionals, that it's very odd
Very odd.
that I'm still alive, that preeclampsia doesn't kill babies, it kills mothers.
Right.
So, and the way I was managed so badly
Very bad. Yeah.
is a miracle, is nothing short of a miracle
That you're still here.
that I'm still here. So when I think of all of that and I look at my family, I give thanks. A lot of times I cry, but I give thanks. And he told me, say, Ilma, just give thanks. That's how you cope with it. That's how you deal with it. As I began to get physical strength, I started having anger. There was anger. There is still anger. And there are a whole lot of things. If at a point it felt like I was learning how to walk, that's how it felt. For over a month, I couldn't go to my front door. I didn't step out into the sun because I was frightened.
What were you frightened about?
In fact, I don't think I can even articulate what I was frightened about. But I just couldn't go outside. I would tremble. I would be afraid. Till now, I can't go to the hospital.
That particular hospital? Or any hospital?
Any hospital. So I had to go to the hospital because, of course, I had a cesarean, and then there were some complications that came as a result. But every time I'm going to the hospital, I'm physically trembling. I'm crying. I'm weeping. When I go in, I can hardly, talk to the doctor. I'm looking at the doctor like, okay, is this one going to kill me now?
Right.
So I had all of that. I still can't drive past the hospital. I would, even if that is the shortest route to where I'm going to, I would go somewhere else.
But it's a journey and you're making progress, which is amazing. Which is amazing. And do you feel like it has brought you and your husband Martin closer?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. It was interesting to see someone put himself aside and say, oh, it's you. It was also amusing to me to watch it, because I knew that it wasn't, a lot of times people feel that losing a child is the grief of the mother.
No.
It's the grief of both parents. And I could see him trying to, not trying, he actually did hold it in a cup. It was going to come out. It's still coming out. But the focus was, you need to get better. Physically, emotionally. So I would say maybe in that healing journey, I'm probably ahead.
Right.
Because he was particular about me recovering. So I got to a point where I was like, I'm going, you are still there. You need to come.
Right.
So, but it was a turning point in our relationship. And a turning point in the positive.
That's great. Do you think that here in Nigeria that people know how to deal with grief properly? Like, we're all used to losing, a father or a mother, but losing a child particularly is heart-wrenching. Apart from the immediate support of your family, do you think that we are good at dealing with grief or supporting someone like yourself who's dealing with grief?
Um, I'm trying to think how best to answer that, because in my own experience, I would say there are there was a way, a lot of people rallied around.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, aside from my family, friends, I had friends who would just come and sit with me. I had the ones that couldn't face me but would keep sending food.
Right.
I had the ones that sent us to a resort for the weekend.
That's nice.
So maybe we do not have it institutionalized, but I would say in my experience, we have people
Right. So you did
who,
have your community of
yes,
friends
of
and family
friends.
support, but
Yes,
in terms of maybe having, like you said, institutions or proper places that you can go and talk about grief, we don't have it here,
no,
and it's
no.
definitely something in this country that we still need to catch up, because obviously there are people who, I always say, long after that person, when somebody dies, for example. I remember when my father died, and I was abroad then, but after a while, all my mom's friends were with her. But then people get on with their lives; they move
Yes,
on, and
eventually.
so I'm sure at some point the food stopped coming. At some
Yeah,
point, the friends stopped coming to sit, not because they don't care, but because they have to move on with their lives. And
yes,
then you're still there. That
yes,
person is still there having to deal with their grief or having to deal with whatever it is that they have to deal with. And
yes.
you can't begrudge them because they have their own lives too.
Oh no.
And so I think that, in this country, I think we need to start having a conversation or looking for ways to create those avenues for people so that when that immediate support goes, there's somewhere else for them to continue that healing journey,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So I know, just to round this off, Awoma, you've been amazing, honestly. I don't want to um, further your pain any more than I have to, but there has been a silver lining, hasn't there, from this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want you
Yeah.
to talk about this silver lining that has come out of this very tragic and harrowing story.
So I'll talk about that. That was also very interesting because at a point while I was still recovering, there was a day I had cried all day, cried all night, cried all day again, cried into the night. And I was just there and I was praying,
Mm-hmm.
talking to God. For whatever odd reason, I was never angry with God. I know people ask me, "Are you angry at God?" I'm like, "No." And for every time there was a word from God that encouraged me.
Mm-hmm.
But on this particular time, I kept asking God, okay, if you had asked me to choose, I would have chosen that she get life, not
Mm-hmm.
me. But okay, I'm here. And while I was crying, I received inspiration. And the inspiration came to me over a couple of days. It didn't just.
Mm-hmm.
So the inspiration came and it was about jigsaw puzzles. Um, and then I was like, jigsaw puzzles. I like jigsaw puzzles, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, jigsaw puzzles. So what about jigsaw puzzles? Okay, do you want to create jigsaw puzzles? Create jigsaw puzzles. Okay. And then I went online and then I started looking. I was like, okay, what do I want to create? Should be there already jigsaw puzzles. And I was checking and then just researching, going online, just doing a whole lot of things. And then, after a couple of days, I got another inspiration, African themed jigsaw puzzles. Like, So I went, I was checking, and then I saw a couple of people had done some things around some festivals in Nigeria. I had seen one of the Lekki Ikoyi link bridge. I was like, African themes. Is it map of Africa? Is it map of Nigeria? I had talked to a friend of mine, and she was like, "Oh, there are hardly any jigsaw puzzles about map of Africa, map of Nigeria. I should do something around that." I was like, okay. And I was searching, and then, over another couple of days, I then got a further inspiration around African folk tales and jigsaw puzzles. So I was like, oh, African folk tales. Ooh. And then I began to research even more about African folk tales, jigsaw puzzles. So you see me frantically working on my laptop. This is me who had been lying down. Literally, I'm just on my bed. And sometimes I put on Netflix on my laptop. I don't know what I'm watching. It's just there. So my children come, they see me, they go. My husband comes, he talks to me a bit, he goes or something. And then here I am, suddenly sat up on my laptop. So my husband comes to me and is like, what is it that you are doing? I was like, jigsaw puzzles, African folk tales. So it was, the kind of thing that happens where there's fire and then you throw it on dried leaves. So that was it. And my husband was like, ooh. And then he too, immediately, okay, African folk tales. And he starts to, and the next thing we're researching. And then my children come, Mommy, what are you working on? You've been watching Netflix since. How come you're working? I'm like, oh, I'm creating jigsaw puzzles. Really? Can we see? Can we see? I'm like, yes, you can see. And then I said, oh, the jigsaw puzzles are based on stories. Oh, can we read the stories? And then they read the stories and they're like, oh, Mommy, don't you think you should end the story this way? Or Mommy, don't you think you should add this to the story? And the next thing you see all four of us huddled up, working on
amazing
jigsaw puzzles. And out of it was birthed K2U puzzles. And it was one of the major ways with which we have worked this recovery journey. Because we became so obsessed with it. It was an obsession. We were literally working day and night on this. And we did the first prototype. We looked at it. We gave our children our, means of experiment. So can we fix it? And then they fix it. Oh, Mommy, this place. Oh, Daddy. And then can we change the picture, this part of the picture? And then we go back, we change day and night. We were obsessing over this thing. And by the time we had done a few, test runs, and my husband is like, oh, we're going into production. I'm like, hey, okay, let's go. And we did the first production. We did the first packaging. We gave it to a couple of people. We did the second packaging. We gave it to a couple of people. By then, we were already building our story base. In a couple of weeks, we had put together over 100 stories from across Africa.
Wow.
My daughter had come again. I was like, Mommy, can we have it in multiple languages? It cannot only be in English. I'm like, oh, okay. And then we started looking for how to put them, have them translated from English to several languages. We had looked at folk tales from South Africa, from Zambia. We had looked at from Ghana. We had from the different parts of Nigeria. So, and that was how,
and the puzzle started. And I know you said, briefly for our viewers, I think it's good to say why puzzles are really important for children and in terms of their growth and the way that they think.
Yeah. So before I say that, I'm going to say something before, which is the idea around the puzzles was for it to also spread like wildfire.
Right.
To as many children across, Nigeria, Africa, and the world because of the benefits. So the benefits of jigsaw puzzles, several. But top on my list is the fact that if you spend 25 minutes a day on a jigsaw puzzle, your IQ increases by 4 points.
Wow, that's huge.
Yes. Secondly, jigsaw puzzles increase your problem solving ability. But what it is it's a huge problem. Pieces everywhere for you to create something out of. So you're creating something out of nothing, technically. Critical thinking, because you have to keep, figuring it out. And very interesting about jigsaw puzzles is, one, you can't cheat your way
That's
out of it.
it. That's right.
You have to complete it. Because it's either it's the piece or it's the piece. So if it's not the piece, there's nothing you can do. You can't wangle it into becoming the piece. So what it means is your brain now begins to retrain itself. When you keep spending time with jigsaw puzzles, your brain, retrains itself. Your brain is now works how AI works. It retrains itself.
Right.
So you see any problem and your brain automatically goes to what you have made to be default mode, which is solve the problem.
Right.
Create a solution. Look at it again. If the piece is this way, even though it's the piece, if it is not in the right, side up, it still wouldn't fit. So your brain is now rewired to say, okay, what are the things that need to be dealt with? What are the problems around me? What are the solutions I can provide? I will also now talk about, the African folk tales, blend of it. The funny thing about African folk tales as well is that it also teaches you critical thinking, teaches you problem solving, bravery, kindness, morals, values, ethics that are sadly, disappearing from the society as with our tales. So that combination was just like, woo, give this to a child and you have a combination of a problem solver and an ethical human being. What else do you want?
Right.
And take this to as many children as possible around the country, and then you see that we begin to solve our problem from within. So nobody is sitting and then thinking, oh, somebody is going to come and give us a solution. You have, created the ability for children to create the solution.
Amazing. I can even see how you've come alive once you're talking about it. So it has been an absolute silver lining for you.
Yes,
and it's
it
helping
has.
you in terms of your recovery.
Yes.
Awoma, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. I think it's going to be amazing helping so many women who are going through grief, so many families going through grief. So thank you once again for being on Real Talk with Pam.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Awoma for sharing her heart-wrenching story, and I wish her all the best in her healing journey. If you or someone you know is dealing with the grief of losing a child, please reach out and get the help and support you need. Till next time, I'm Pamela Igbo. Bye for now.